the first verse. After Ahab died, Moab rebelled against Israel. One day, Ahaziah fell through the balcony railing on the rooftop of his house in Samaria and was injured. Hmm. He sent messengers off to consult Beelzebub, the god of Ekron. Am I going to recover from this accident? God's angel spoke to Elijah the Tishbite, up on your feet, go out and meet the messengers of the king of Samaria with this word. Is it because there's no God in Israel that you're running off to consult Beelzebub, god of Ekron? Here's a message from the God you've tried to bypass. You're not going to get out of that bed you're in. You're as good as dead already. Elijah delivered the message and was gone. The messengers went back. The king said, so why are you back so soon? What's going on? They told him a man met us and said, turn around and go back to the king who sent you. Tell him God's message. Is it because there's no God in Israel that you're running off to consult Beelzebub, god of Ekron? You needn't bother. You're not going to get out of that bed you're in. You're as good as dead already. The king said, tell me more about this man who you met and said these things to you. What was he like? Shaggy, they said, and wearing a leather belt. He said, that has to be Elijah the Tishbite. The king sent a captain with 50 men to Elijah. Meanwhile, Elijah was sitting big as life on top of a hill. The captain said, oh, holy man, here's the king's orders. Come down. Elijah answered the captain of the 50. If it's true that I'm a holy man, lightning strike you and your 50 men. Out of the blue, lightning struck and incinerated the captain and his 50. Now, that wasn't nice. They were just following the king's orders. The king sent another captain with 50 men. Oh, holy man, king's orders. Come down and right now. Elijah answered, if it's true that I'm a holy man, I'd have got out of there. Lightning strike you and your 50 men. Immediately, a divine lightning bolt struck and incinerated the captain and his 50. The king then sent a third captain with his 50 men. For a third time, a captain with his 50 approached Elijah. This one fell on his knees in supplication. Oh, holy man, have respect for my life and the souls of these 50 men. Twice now, lightning from out of the blue has struck and incinerated captains with their 50 men. Please, I beg you, respect my life. The angel of God told Elijah, go ahead and don't be afraid. Elijah got up and went down with him to the king. Elijah told him God's word, because you sent messengers to consult Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, as if there were no God in Israel to whom you could pray, you'll never get out of that bed alive. Already you're as good as dead. And he died exactly as God's word spoken by Elijah had said. Because Ahaziah had no son, his brother Joram became the next king. The succession took place in the second year of the reign of Jehoram, son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. The rest of Ahaziah's life is recorded in the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel. 2 Kings chapter 2. Just before God took Elijah to heaven in the whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha were on a walk out of Gilgal. Elijah said to Elisha, stay here. God has sent me on an errand to Bethel. Elisha said, not on your life. I'm not letting you out of my sight. So they both went to Bethel. The guild of prophets at Bethel, Elisha said, did you know that God is going to take your master away from you today? Yeah, he said, I know it, but keep it quiet. Then Elijah said to Elisha, stay here. God has sent me on an errand to Jericho. Elisha said, not on your life. I'm not letting you out of my sight. So they both went to Jericho. The guild of prophets at Jericho came to Elijah and said, did you know that God is going to take your master away from you today? Yes, he said, I know it, but keep it quiet. Then Elijah said to Elisha, stay here. God has sent me on an errand to Jordan. Elisha said, not on your life. I'm not letting you out of my sight. And so the two of them went their way together. Meanwhile, 50 men from the guild of the prophets gathered some distance away while the two of them stood at the Jordan. Elijah took his cloak, rolled it up, and hit the water with it. The river divided, and the two men walked through on dry land. When they reached the other side, Elijah said to Elisha, what can I do for you before I'm taken from you? Ask anything. Elisha said, your life repeated in my life. I want to be a holy man just like you. That's a hard one, said Elijah, but if you're watching when I'm taken from you, you'll get what you've asked for, but only if you're watching. And so it happened, they were walking along and talking. Suddenly a chariot and horses of fire came between them, and Elijah went up in a whirlwind to heaven. Elisha saw it and shouted, my father, you, the chariot and the cavalry of Israel. When he could no longer see anything, he grabbed his robe and ripped it to pieces. Then he picked up Elijah's cloak that had fallen from him, returned to the shore of the Jordan, and stood there. He took Elijah's cloak, all that was left of Elijah, and hit the river with it, saying, now where's the God of Elijah? Where is he? When he struck the water, the river divided, and Elisha walked through. The guild of prophets from Jericho saw the whole thing from where they were standing. They said, the spirit of Elijah lives in Elisha. They welcomed and honored him. They then said, we're at your service. We have 50 reliable men here. Let's send them out to look for your master. Maybe God's spirit has swept him off to the mountain or dropped him into a remote ravine. Elisha said, no, don't send them. But they pestered him until he caved in. Go ahead then, send them. So they sent 50 men off. For 3 days they looked, searching high and low, nothing. Finally, they returned to Elisha in Jericho. He told them, "So there, didn't I tell you?" One day, the men of the city said to Elisha, "You can see for yourself, master, how well our city is located, but the water is polluted and nothing grows." He said, "Bring me a brand new bowl and put some salt in it." They brought it to him. He then went to the spring, sprinkled the salt in it, and proclaimed God's word. "I've healed this water. It will no longer kill you or poison your land." And sure enough, the water was healed and remains so to this day, just as Elisha said. Another time, Elijah was on his way to Bethel, and some little kids came out of town and taunted him. "What's up, old bald head? Out of our way, skinhead." Elisha turned, took one look at them, and cursed them in the name of God. Now, see, that's for you don't need to do all that. Two bears charged out of the underbrush and knocked them about, ripping them from limb to limb, 42 children in all. Elisha went up to Mount Carmel and then returned to Samaria. 2 Kings chapter 3, Joram of Israel. Joram, son of Ahab, began his rule over Israel and Samaria in the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. He was king for 12 years. In God's sight, he was a bad king, but he wasn't as bad as his father and mother. To his credit, he destroyed the obscene Baal stone that his father had made, but he hung on to the sinful practices of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, the ones that had corrupted Israel for so long. He wasn't about to give them up. King Misha of Moab raised sheep. He was forced to give the king of Israel 100,000 lambs and another 100,000 rams. When Ahab died, the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. So King Joram set out from Samaria and prepared Israel for war. His first move was to send a message to Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. "The king of Moab had rebelled against me. Why would you join me? Would you join me and fight him?" "I'm with you all the way," said Jehoshaphat. "My troops are your troops. My horses are your horses. Which route shall we take?" "Through the badlands of Edom." The king of Israel, the king of Judah, and the king of Edom started out on what proved to be a looping detour. After 7 days, they had run out of water for both army and animals. The king of Israel said, "Bad news. God has gotten us 3 kings out of here to dump us into the hand of Moab." But Jehoshaphat said, "Isn't there a prophet of God anywhere around through whom we can consult God?" One of the servants of the king of Israel said, "Elisha, son of Shaphat, is around here, the one who was Elijah's right-hand man." Jehoshaphat said, "Good, a man we can trust." So the 3 of them, the king of Israel, Jehoshaphat, and the king of Edom, went to meet him. Elisha addressed the king of Israel. "What do you and I have in common? Go consult the puppet prophets of your father and mother." "Never," said the king of Israel. "It's God who has gotten us into this fix, dumping all 3 of us kings into the hand of Moab." Elisha said, "As God of the angel armies lives, and before whom I stand ready to serve, if it weren't for the respect I have for Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, I wouldn't give you the time of day. But considering, bring me a minstrel." When a minstrel played, the power of God came on Elisha. He then said, "Here's God's word. Dig ditches all over this valley. Here's what will happen. You won't hear the wind. You won't see the rain. But this valley is going to fill up with water, and your army and your animals will drink their fill. This is easy for God to do. He will also hand over Moab to you. You will ravage the country, knock out its fortifications, level the key villages, clear cut the orchards, clog the springs, and litter the cultivated fields with stones." In the morning, it was at the hour of morning sacrifice. The water had arrived, water pouring in from the west, from Edom, a flash flood, filling the valley with water. By this time, everyone in Moab had heard that the kings had come up to make war against them. Everyone who was able to handle a sword was called into service and took a stand at the border. They were up and ready early in the morning when the sun rose over the water. From where the Moabites stood, the water reflecting the sun looked red like blood. "Blood! Look at the blood," they said. "The kings must have fought each other. Bloody massacre. Go for the loot, Moab." When Moab entered the camp of Israel, the Israelites were up on their feet, killing Moabites right and left. The Moabites running for their lives. Israelites relentless in pursuit, a slaughter. They leveled the towns, littered the cultivated fields with rocks, clogged the springs, and clear-cut the orchards. Only the capital, Kir-Hareseth, was left intact, and that not for long. It too was surrounded and attacked with thrown and flung rocks. When the king of Moab realized that he was fighting a losing battle, he took 700 swordsmen to hack a corridor past the king of Edom, but they didn't make it. Then he took his son, his firstborn, who would succeed him as king, and sacrificed him on the city wall. That set off furious anger against Israel. Israel pulled back and returned home. 2 Kings 4. One day, the wife of a man from the guild of the prophets called out to Elisha, "Your servant, my husband, is dead. You well know what a good man he was, devoted to God. Now the man to whom he was in debt is on his way to collect by taking my 2 children as slaves." Elisha said, "I wonder how I can be of help. Tell me, what do you have in your house?" "Nothing," she said. "Well, I do have a little oil." Here's what you do, said Elisha. Go up and down the street, borrow jugs and bowls from all your neighbors, and not just a few, all you can get. Then come home and lock the door behind you, you and your sons. Pour oil into each container. When each is full, set it aside. She did what he said. She locked the door behind her and her sons. As they brought the containers to her, she filled them. When all the jugs and bowls were full, she said to one of her sons, another jug, please. He said, that's it. There are no more jugs. Then the oil stopped. She went and told the story to the man of God. He said, go sell the oil and make good on your debts. Live both you and your sons on what's left. One day, Elisha passed through Shunem. A leading lady of the town talked him into stopping for a meal. And then it became his custom. Wherever he passed through, he stopped by for a meal. I'm certain, said the woman to her husband, that this man who stops by with us all the time is a holy man of God. Why don't we add on a small room upstairs and furnish it with a bed and desk and chair and lamp so that when he comes by, he can stay with us? And so it happened that the next time Elisha came by, he went to the room and lay down for a nap. Then he said to his servant Gehazi, tell the Shunammite woman, I want to see her. He called her and she came to him. Through Gehazi, Elisha said, you've gone far beyond the call of duty and taken care of us. What can we do for you? Do you have a request we can bring to the king or to the commander of the army? She replied, nothing. I'm secure and satisfied in my family. Elisha conferred with Gehazi. There's got to be something we can do for her, but what? Gehazi said, well, she has no son and her husband is an old man. Call her in, said Elisha. He called her and she stood at the open door. Elisha said to her, this time next year, you're going to be nursing an infant son. Oh, my master, oh, holy man. She said, don't play games with me, teasing me with such fantasies. The woman conceived. A year later, just as Elijah had said, she had a son. The child grew. One day he went to his father, who was working with the harvest hands, complaining, my head, my head. His father ordered a servant, carry him to his mother. The servant took him in his arms and carried him to his mother. He lay on her lap until noon and died. She took him up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, shut him in alone, and left. She then called her husband, get me a servant and a donkey so I can go to the holy man. I'll be back as soon as I can. But why today? This isn't a holy day. It's neither new moon or Sabbath. She said, don't ask questions. I need to go right now. Trust me. She went ahead and saddled the donkey, ordering her servant, take the lead and go as fast as you can. I'll tell you if you're going too fast. And so off she went. She came to the holy man at Mount Carmel. The holy man, spotting her while she was still a long way off, said to his servant Gehazi, look out there. Why, it's the Shunammite woman. Quickly now. Ask her, is something wrong? Are you all right? Your husband, your child? She said, everything's fine. But when she reached the holy man at the mountain, she threw herself at his feet and held tightly to him. Gehazi came up to pull her away, but the holy man said, leave her alone. Can't you see that she's in distress? But God hasn't let me in on why. I'm completely in the dark. Then she spoke up. Did I ask for a son, master? Didn't I tell you? Don't tease me with false hopes. He ordered Gehazi, don't lose a minute. Grab my staff and run as fast as you can. If you meet anyone, don't even take time to greet him. And if anyone greets you, don't even answer. Lay my staff across the boy's face. The boy's mother said, as sure as God lives and you live, you're not leaving me behind. And so Gehazi let her take the lead and followed behind. But Gehazi arrived first and laid the staff across the boy's face. But there was no sign, no sound, no sign of life. Gehazi went back to meet Elisha and said the boy hadn't stirred. Elisha entered the house and found the boy stretched out on the bed, dead. He went into the room and locked the door, just the two of them in the room, and prayed to God. He then got into the bed with the boy, covered him with his body, mouth on mouth, eyes on eyes, hands on hands. And as he stretched out over him like that, the boy's body became warm. Elisha got up, paced back and forth in the room. Then he went back and stretched himself upon the boy again. The boy started sneezing. 7 times he sneezed and opened his eyes. He called Gehazi and said, get the Shunammite woman in here. He called her and she came in. Elisha said, embrace your son. She fell at Elisha's feet, face to the ground in reverent awe. She then embraced her son and went out with him. Elisha went back down to Gilgal. There was a famine there. While he was consulting with the guild of the prophets, he told his servant, put a large pot on the fire and cook some stew for the prophets. One of the men went into the field to get some herbs. He came across a wild vine and picked gourds from it, filling his gunny sack. He brought them back, sliced them up, and put them in the stew, even though no one knew what kind of plant it was. The stew was then served up for the men to eat. They started to eat, then exclaimed, death in the pot, O man of God, death in the pot. Nobody could eat it. Elisha ordered, get me some meal. Then he sprinkled it into the stew pot. Now serve it up to the men, he said. They ate it, and it was fine. Nothing wrong with that stew. One day a man arrived from Baal Shalishah. He brought the man of God 20 loaves of fresh baked bread from the yearly harvest, along with a few apples from the orchard. Elisha said, pass it around to the people to eat. His servant said, for 100 men, there's not nearly enough. Elisha said, just go ahead and do it. God said, there's plenty. And sure enough, there was. He passed around what he had. They not only ate, but had leftovers. Hmm. Sounds familiar. 2 Kings chapter 5. Naaman was general of the army under the king of Aram. He was important to his master, who held him in the highest esteem because it was by him that God had given victory to Aram. Truly great man, but afflicted with a grievous skin disease. It so happened that Aram on one of its raiding expeditions against Israel, captured a young girl who became a maid to Naaman's wife. One day she said to her mistress, "Oh, if only my master can meet the prophet of Samaria, he would be healed of skin disease." Naaman went straight to his master and reported what the girl from Israel had said. Naaman went straight to his master. "Well then, go," said the king of Aram, "and I'll send a letter of introduction to the king of Israel." So he went off, taking with him about 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and 10 sets of clothes. That's a lot of wealth. Naaman delivered the letter to the king himself, to the king of Israel, rather. The letter read, "When you get this letter, you'll know that I personally sent my servant Naaman to you. Heal him of his skin disease." When the king of Israel read the letter, he was terribly upset, ripping his robe to pieces. He said, "Am I God with the power to bring death to life that I get orders to heal this man's disease? What's going on here?" That king's trying to pick a fight. That's what. Elisha, the man of God, heard what had happened, that the king of Israel was so distressed that he ripped his robe to shreds. He sent word to the king, "Why are you so upset ripping your robe like this? Send him to me. He'll learn that there's a prophet in Israel." So Naaman with his horses and chariots arrived in style and stopped at Elisha's door. Elisha sent out a servant to meet him with this message: "Go to the river Jordan and immerse yourself 7 times. Your skin will be healed and you'll be as good as new." Naaman lost his temper. He spun around saying, "I thought he'd personally come out and meet me, call on the name of God, wave his hand over the diseased spot and get rid of the disease. The Damascus rivers, Abana and Pharpar, are cleaner by far than any of the rivers of Israel. Why not bathe in them? I'd at least get clean." He stomped off mad as a hornet. But his servants caught up with him and said, "Father, if the prophet had asked you to do something hard and heroic, wouldn't you have done it? So why not this simple? Wash and be clean." So he did it. He went down and immersed himself in the Jordan 7 times, following the orders of the holy man. His skin was healed. It was like the skin of a little baby. He was as good as new. He then went back to the holy man. He and his entourage stood before him and said, "I now know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is no God anywhere on earth other than the God of Israel. In gratitude, let me give you a gift." "As God lives," Elisha replied, "the God whom I serve, I'll take nothing from you." Naaman tried his best to get him to take something, but he wouldn't do it. "If you won't take anything," said Naaman, "let me ask you for something. Give me a load of dirt, as much as a team of donkeys can carry, because I'm never again going to worship any other than God. But there's one thing for which I need God's pardon. When my master, leaning on my arm, enters the shrine of Rimmon and worships there, and I'm with him there worshiping Rimmon, may you see to it that God forgive me for this." Elisha said, "Everything will be all right. Go in peace." But he hadn't gone far when Gehazi, servant of Elisha, the holy man, said to himself, "My master has let this Aramean Naaman slip through his fingers without so much as a thank you. By the living God, I'm going after him to get something or other from him." And Gehazi took off after Naaman. Naaman saw him running after him and jumped down from his chariot to greet him. "Is something wrong?" "Nothing wrong, but there's something come up. My master sent me to tell you 2 young men just showed up from the hill country of Ephraim, brothers from the guild of the prophets. Supply their needs with 75 pounds of silver and a couple set of clothes." "You lying wonder, heathen." Naaman said, "Of course. How about 150 pounds? Naaman insisted. He tied up the money in 2 sacks and gave him the 2 set of clothes. He even gave him 2 servants to carry the gifts back with him. When they got to the fort on the hill, Gehazi took the gifts from the servants, stored them inside, then sent the servants back. He returned and stood before his master. Elisha said, "So what you been up to, Gehazi?" "Nothing much," he said. Lying wonder. Elisha said, "Didn't you know I was with you in spirit when that man stepped down from his chariot to greet you? Tell me, is this a time to look after yourself, lining your pockets with gifts? Naaman's skin disease will now infect you and your family with no relief in sight." Gehazi walked away, his skin flaky and white like snow. Wow, he was cursed. 2 Kings 6. One day the guild of the prophets came to Elisha and said, "You can see that this place where we're living under your leadership is getting cramped. We have no elbow room. Give us permission to go down to the Jordan where each of you will get a log. We'll build a room in your place." Elisha said, "Go ahead." One of them then said, "Please come along with us." He said, "Certainly." He went with them. They came to the Jordan, started chopping down trees. As one of them was felling the timber, his axe head flew off and sank in the river. "Oh, no, master," he cried out, "and it was borrowed." The holy man said, "Where did it sink?" The man showed him the place. He cut off a branch and tossed it at that spot. The axe head floated up. Grab it, he said. The man reached out and took it. One time when the king of Aram was at war with Israel, after consulting with his officers, he said, at such and such a place, I want an ambush set. The holy man sent a message to the king of Israel. Watch out when you pass in this place, because Aram has set an ambush there. So the king of Israel sent word concerning the place of which the holy man had warned him. This kind of thing happened all the time. The king of Aram was furious over all this. He called his officers together and said, tell me who is leaking information to the king of Israel. Who is the spy in our ranks? But one of the men said, no, my master, dear king, it's not any of us. It's Elisha the prophet in Israel. He tells the king of Israel everything you say, even what you whisper in your bedroom. The king said, go and find out where he is. I'll send someone to capture him. The report came back. He's in Dothan. Then he dispatched horses and chariots, an impressive fighting force. They came by night and surrounded the city. Early in the morning, the servant of the holy man got up and went out. Surprise! Horses and chariots surrounding the city. The young man exclaimed, oh, master, what shall we do? He said, don't worry about it. They're more on our side than on their side. Then Elisha prayed, oh, God, open his eyes and let him see. The eyes of the young man were open, and he saw a wonder, the whole mountainside full of horses and chariots of fire surrounding Elisha. When the Arameans attacked, Elisha prayed to God, strike these people blind. And God struck them blind, just as Elisha said. Then Elisha called them out to them. Not that way, not this city. Follow me, and I'll lead you to the man you're looking for. And he led them into Samaria. As they entered the city, Elijah prayed, oh, God, open their eyes so they can see where they are. God opened their eyes. They looked around. They were trapped in Samaria. When the king of Israel saw them, he said to Elisha, Father, shall I massacre the lot? Not on your life, said Elisha. You didn't lift a hand to capture them, and now you're not going to kill them. And now you're going to kill them, rather. No, sir, make a feast for them and send them back to their master. So he prepared a huge feast for them. After they ate and drank their fill, he dismissed them. Then they returned home to their master. The raiding bands of Aram didn't bother Israel anymore. At a later time, this Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, pulled together his troops and launched a siege on Samaria. This brought on a terrible famine so bad that food prices soared astronomically. 80 shekels for a donkey's head, 5 shekels for a bowl of field greens. One day the king of Israel was walking along the city wall. A woman cried out, help, your majesty. He answered, if God won't help you, where on earth can I go for help? To the granary, to the dairy? The king continued, tell me your story. She said, this woman came to me and said, give up your son and we'll have him for today's supper. Oh, Lord, today we'll eat my son. So we cooked my son and ate him. The next day I told her, your turn, bring your son so we can have him for supper. But she had hidden her son away. When the king heard the woman's story, he ripped apart his robe. Since he was walking on the city wall, everyone saw that next to his skin, he was wearing coarse burlap. And he called out, God do his worst to me and more if Elisha son of Shaphat still has a head on his shoulders at the day's end. Elisha was sitting at home, the elders sitting with him. The king had already dispatched an executioner. But before the man arrived, Elisha spoke to the elders. Do you know that this murderer has just now sent a man to take off my head? Look, when the executioner arrives, shut the door and lock it. Don't I even now hear the footsteps of his master behind him? While he was giving instructions, the king showed up accusing. This trouble is directly from God. And what's next? I'm fed up with God. Wow. This is the word of the Lord.